Hey Flavio, come here. Let me show you something. Look at this. Look what I got here. I want to know if you remember this. Do you remember this picture here?
Yes, I do. This was a great trip, man. We're proudly representing. That was awesome.
This was in Belo Horizonte. I think this is a great story. I think we could share.
Yeah.
We were in different times, and Jiu-Jitsu in Belo Horizonte was just starting, right?
Yeah.
So I remember we were at Gracie Barra and we received a call. I don't remember who brought it to the mats, and listen, we have to go to Belo Horizonte. We have to go to Belo Horizonte. Who is ready? Who is ready? And it was like Thursday, I think, right? Or Wednesday, and everybody was talking about what's going on. Oh, Draculino, he's starting Jiu-Jitsu there, but there is also a school, a Carson Gracie school that is opening close, and there will be a very important competition. And they are bringing all the Carson Gracie students from Rio de Janeiro to compete there.
What year was this? Was 1996, right?
Yeah.
So Carson was the toughest team that we were competing against. And I think this was before the first World Championships, which was the first tournament that Gracie Barra beat the Carson team. Yes. But regardless, I think the point is there is a very strong rivalry at that point between Gracie Barra and Carson Gracie, right?
The biggest rivalry.
Yeah.
And we found out that they were traveling to Belo Horizonte to do good at the tournament. I remember Draculino didn't have a lot of students at that time.
Yes.
And he sent a message, send the team.
Like a smoke signal, right?
Yeah, send the team because they're coming and the competition is going to happen this weekend. And I remember we went together. We were in the same place, so we were sleeping together in different rooms.
It was an apartment, right? It wasn't a hotel. I remember there was we were sharing rooms with
yeah, it was like
4 or 5 guys.
An apartment that similar to what we have here. So we have 2 sleeping in a room, 3 there. It was cold. We were not prepared. Some of us sleeping with winter, kimono.
Yeah.
We brought the kimono. We sleep on a gi. And I remember the surprise of the Carson Gracie athletes when they saw us arriving in the tournament, because they thought that we were not coming. So they thought they would,
it would be an easy
of course,
one, right?
dominate the tournament. And we arrive, they start counting, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I see all of them. We were rivals, so we didn't talk to each other at that time. It was not like today. So we look at them, they look at us, oh, they can too. And I believe Gracie Barra got first place at that tournament.
I think so.
And it was the beginning of a big movement. Today, Belo Horizonte is one of the biggest and strongest regions. Yeah.
Man, I appreciate you bringing that story, right? Because it's just so important. It's just some new memories coming back to my mind now. Because at that point in time, Jiu-Jitsu was mostly in Rio.
Yeah.
There was some things were happening in São Paulo. There's always been a very strong grappling, judo, jiu-jitsu thing happening in Manaus, right? We knew about it, but they didn't have a lot of access to Rio.
Yeah.
And then, Belo Horizonte was starting, and Draculino was one of, the main guys at Barra. Him going there, it was a cool feeling to have him representing us there.
Oh, yeah.
So when he sent the request, there was not even a second thought, right? Let's just all jump on the car and let's go. Let's support our brother. It was pretty cool.
And I remember his expression of gratitude when he saw us arriving. He see us and we're gonna organize the food. You guys don't worry about anything. We're gonna just be ready for the fight. And we arrive at the tournament and we see there was some jiu-jitsu going on there, some other teams. I remember it's called Copa Leão Dourado.
Leão Dourado, the golden lion, right?
Yeah, the golden lion.
There's something about that golden lion in terms of the symbol that the IBJJF uses, right?
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't know what exactly that golden lion stands for, but there's something that is deeply rooted in how organized sport jiu-jitsu started in Brazil. I don't know exactly what it is, though.
I remember this one of the most special moments in my career. We've been called to travel to another state to defend the team, to to represent. We were not prepared. We didn't have a camp for anything. We just listen. In 2 days you have a fight. Jump in the car. We travel. And this was the spirit, I think, of our team at that time. I believe that that was something special we carried with us, right?
Very special, especially for our generation. A lot of people don't realize this, but if you think back in time, Brazil as a country was going through a lot. It was very hard for families to get by, right? The middle class was being squished by inflation. There was Plano Real, the new currency was coming in. A lot of us came from broken families, divorced parents. So in the 90s, when I think we joined Gracie Barra, at least that's how I remember, it was the first tribe, like community group or sport that I joined, that I felt like there was a higher purpose, there was a higher calling. Because if you go to surf school, it's really about learning how to surf. Soccer, if you're good at it, you're trying to have a career as a professional soccer. There's not really like an allegiance to a certain team. I think the environment that we trained and that rivalry that existed between the teams and the pride in being a Jiu-Jitsu student was instilled in us. So it was incredible because you said, we didn't have a camp, but our life was a camp, right? Train, eat, sleep, repeat, go to school just so you can continue to do that, right?
This concept of a camp didn't exist.
No, we didn't need it.
To be ready, and we were ready all the time. So that was the way we learned. It's amazing to remember these things. I saw this picture. I said I have to bring to Flavio because he will for sure remember this tournament, this experience, and.
Man, look at those mats. Do you remember how much mat burning we used to get from those things?
And the fact that the tournaments didn't have a schedule, so we arrived in the morning and we didn't know when the fight was going to happen. We just arrived, put the gi on, and wait for the call. So it was really, really special and interesting that we are here.
Yeah, and this idea of fighting for something bigger than ourselves. I remember when you got your Legacy Award at the World Summit of 2019. You said something there that was really special for me. It's not an easy idea for people to understand, but you're able to summarize it on a very simple concept, which is to fight for those 9 points. Do you remember on your speech, right? Because that was the reason why we competed. We didn't compete for ourselves. Of course, we wanted to win. We wanted the gold medal. But at that point in time, the recognition was mostly from our peers in our school. I mean, there was no social media. I mean, Gracie Mag was just getting started. For you to even be featured and have any sort of larger recognition, it was really not even in the horizon. So that concept didn't exist. So we did fight for those 9 points, and it was really about helping the team win, because that's what mattered most to us, right? It was very, very cool.
Yeah. We were training and thinking about how good we could represent our team. That was the main goal for us. We believe that was our goal, to represent our team. And when we stepped on the mats with our Gracie Barra, at that time we had patches, right? It was like, had those patches, and just the fact you have a Gracie Barra patch already show to people that you're dedicated, that you're training. So it was a special era. I think our generation was really lucky to be there, to learn, to train.
And I think that culture of training was really on the foundation that allowed Jiu-Jitsu to become such a preeminent martial art in the MMA world. Of course, the technique is amazing and it's efficient, but just the knowledge alone, it wouldn't bring it this far. And we all owed so much to the Gracie family for the fights they had. Hicks and Royce, it was just incredible. But if you think about it, they were able to instill that same mentality in many generations, in all of us. And many of us went on to become some of the best fighters in the world, whatever it is that we were fighting for, I remember my brother going to the to the UFC, to Pride FC, and he was always representing Jiu-Jitsu.
Yeah.
It was that pride of, man, this is not just about me. Actually, a lot of pressure too, because you felt like the weight of the entire sport was on our shoulders, or the weight of the whole team was on our shoulders. And that psychology, that mentality, mixed, of course, with an incredible fighting system, I think it was essential for Jiu-Jitsu to become what it has become. And even I think for you, like when you decided to move to a very far place for us, right, in Slovenia, it's home for you. Of course, it was an opportunity for you to make a living through Jiu-Jitsu, but I think there was more risk and uncertainty than opportunity. So you went there in a sense of mission, right? I'm going to help expand this legacy. I'm going to fight for Jiu-Jitsu. Again, not just doing it for yourself, but doing it for the sport, doing it for Gracie Barra. And that is such a valuable, I think, element of our culture that to a great extent has allowed us to get this far as a sport and as an organization, right?
Definitely, it's hard to find something so rewarding as representing someone, especially represent someone that you believe, that you have the same beliefs, that you feel proud as you do it. So it was always in my mind going somewhere and represent our school. I want to represent that energy that I grew. I want to bring that energy to wherever I would go. I believe that the idea of brotherhood was always there. As we arrive at Gracie Barra at that time, we feel like part of a big family, because actually they were part of the same family.
Yeah.
They were Gracie's half of the mat, they were cousins, they were actually family members. And being accepted on that environment gave us the feeling that we were one of them.
Yeah.
I think at some point, I think you feel the same. It's hard to make a sentence using one of us or using our names without using Gracie Barra name.
Yeah.
So I was never Maia, I was Maia from Gracie Barra.
Yeah.
So these are not separate things. It's hard to imagine these two things separately.
Yeah, it
So
becomes
you're
part of our
cachorrinho,
identity, right?
You're cachorrinho from Gracie Barra.
Yeah.
You're not just cachorrinho. Flavio Almeida from Gracie Barra. I think there was always kind of almost like our surname. I was related
Our surname,
to
I love
very,
that.
very
Yeah.
deep
Yeah.
into us, So that's why we keep working with the same passion, I think. 'Cause
Absolutely.
this is who we are at the end.
Man, it was so cool. You brought back the idea of patches, right? I remember we used to, well, not literally, but it was a fight to get those patches, because they never had enough for everyone. I don't know why it was so hard to make
And it
those
was not
patches.
given to everyone.
It was not given. So they would arrive with the patch. Actually, they would take pre-orders,
Yeah.
right? And I remember, asking my dad for money. It wasn't that much, but as a kid, you're all broke. So and my dad, what do you use it for? No, I want to buy a patch. I had to explain to my father why a patch was so important.
Yes.
And it was exactly that. It was like I was selling to my dad the idea. Look, I gotta go there and I have to represent Gracie Barra. It's my team. If I don't have the patch on my gi, then it's just me, And he's like, all right, give me the money, I bought the patch. And then you have to bring it to a place so you can sew it in your gi. And a lot of people didn't know how to do that, so the patch would fall off. It was a battle just to have, that patch like as part of your identity, especially when you go to a tournament, right?
Oh, definitely.
Very special.
And based on the amount of dedication from instructors and students, that patch was also a factor in the fight, in the mental
That's true.
aspect. You arrive, you put that Gracie Barra kimono, and when they see that patch, because everybody knew that not everyone had the patch. So even our opponents and rivals, they were like, oh, he's Gracie Barra, and he had the patch. So, oh yeah, this is a problem for sure.
It was a badge of like quality and pedigree, right?
It was. And I think that the uniform today makes it more natural, right? So you don't have to think about all that, on where I will sew the kimono, which kimono I'm gonna get. So when the first uniforms came, we were like, oh my God, we don't need to worry about this anymore. Let's just put the gi on.
Yeah.
Maybe the new generation don't realize that moment that we were like, oh, we have uniforms.
Yes.
So, yeah.
But that's really the meaning behind the uniform, that it's so important for people, especially the new generation, to understand, you know, because if these stories are not told, what they perceive is just what they can touch and what they can see, right? They can touch the gis are awesome, they keep making it better and better, but the meaning behind it has to do with these stories, you know. And I wasn't there because at this point I was in college, but the process of creating the uniform, designing the uniform, embodies all of that sense of pride. And I think that desire that Master Carlos had, like you said, from the beginning, to create a team, a clan, a tribe of, you know, elite warriors that would fight not just for themselves, that they would have a very strong connection between each other, that they would go out there and do whatever was good for them, but always with that thing on our back, that we're fighting for something much bigger than ourselves. And I think a lot of people, actually I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are on this, because I think a lot of people confuse this idea of brotherhood as something that you have to let go of who you are, your own identity. And just like you said, GB is our surname, right? So I'm Flavio from Gracie Barra. I always felt like it elevates me, right? And what I learned is that if you fight for yourself, you're only gonna go so far, because it's just for you. And then, but if you fight for something bigger than ourselves, if you fight for your immediate family, for your kids, for your wife, for your team, you're gonna go much further, because quitting is not an option, because it's not just about you. It's about people that you love and and things that you care for. Do you see it that way too?
Sure. Our team, it's growing, and eventually people, when they arrive, they already see everything done in the way it is, and they might don't realize what it took to get where we are. And I think if we have more chances like this to talk about these stories of commitment, we're able to let them know what they actually represent. I think that every Gracie Barra student should know, when he put that gi, what he's representing.
Yeah.
And I think that it's more than a high-level jiu-jitsu techniques and good jiu-jitsu. I think we carry that family thing, that idea of representing, that like this is more important than your abilities, your capacities, or your success, your personal success. One day, Flavio, I had a friend of mine, we were in a conversation, and he did a question to me. So how your work is doing, how you're doing in Slovenia, how is it going? I said, oh, amazing, man, have a lot of students, it's going well. And he asked me, but how many lives did you change through Jiu-Jitsu? And I was like, well, everybody that's trained with me, it's changing lives somehow. I said, no, I'm talking about how many lives, how many people live from it based on your work. How many people actually are professionals. And I admit that at that point, I didn't think much about it. And in Slovenia, I was the only professional. And it shocked me, it took my attention. And from that point became one of my goals in life. How many people
can make a living
from Jiu-Jitsu based on the work I do. And I believe your work, Gracie Barra work, the ICP, all the tools, and the effort of the team was a big factor in changing this direction. So from that day, my goal was to change lives, and not only on the mat with sharing jiu-jitsu, but make a huge effort to that they could live the dream like we did. Like we living the dream, but it's not enough that we live the dream. Like
No.
I want to know how many more could live dreams with us.
Yeah.
You know, so today there are more professionals, and not only instructors, you have professional PDs, you have professionals in other areas that are directly related to our work. And I think this is just possible if you come from this mentality, from this background that is not so exclusively related with your personal success, but you start to realize that your success will just have sense if it affects others in this way. Do you agree with that? Do
Man,
you
that's
feel like
so
this?
interesting, because I think what you're talking about is how how this mentality of fighting for something bigger than ourselves, how that has evolved beyond just going to a tournament and competing, or going to an MMA fight and representing the sport. And it has become, I think it has morphed into this idea of service, right? Because at some point, as you were talking, I saw your thoughts went from battlefield to improving people's lives. I never thought it from that angle, because I think that the idea, and we say that a lot at Gracie Barra, of keeping the legacy alive, I think it's very strongly tied to this idea of service. Is to realize that we want, this thing is so awesome, it's so cool, that we want it, like, sincerely, we want it to outlive us. Whatever is it that we experience of awesomeness from Jiu-Jitsu, the tournaments, the medals, the lessons, the confidence, the discipline, the great life that we built for ourselves, we want it to outlive us. But not for ourselves. We want more and more people to be able to experience what we experience. And you're right, I think it comes from that mentality of doing not just for ourselves.
Do you feel that with Master Carlos as well?
Yeah.
That he just, for his life, he have settled his goals, he have his things, he lived the life. And for him, the biggest pleasure is that we also have that.
Yeah.
I think this is the way to keep the legacy alive.
Yeah.
That's the meaning of keeping the legacy alive. You mentioned about service. I want to share a story. When I was a teenager, start to hear about the samurais, you know, like samurais, the battles, the warriors, and I was like, okay, let me study a bit more. And for my disappointment, the first content that I saw, I read The Meaning of Samurai, literally translating the man that serve.
Is that so?
Yeah,
I didn't know
that was the translation,
Okay.
the man that serve.
That's interesting.
And I was so disappointed because I thought it would be the man that
Chops
finished,
people heads off.
chops people. And I was like, man, the man that serve. And then I kept reading, even lost a bit of the interest on that topic. And later on, living the martial art lifestyle, realized that that's what is the meaning of a samurai. Like,
Yeah.
that's what means living like a samurai, like a warrior.
Yeah.
It's like your life is dedicated on service.
Yeah.
And when we understand that, we can fulfill our life as Jiu-Jitsu, not only practitioners, but as Jiu-Jitsu people,
Yeah.
right? So I think when we realize that we're basically here to serve, and this is the meaning of who we are, things get clear, I guess.
Man, it's so good you bringing that, because if you go back to that culture, the warrior culture of Japan, there was also this notion that the samurai that didn't serve a certain clan, his status amongst the class of warriors was less, right? So it was not just about how good of a fighter you were. It had also to do with, like, who do you serve, and do you serve anything but yourself, right? I think the name of the samurai without a clan was the Ronin,
Ronin,
right?
yes,
Ronin. So that's the idea, right?
Yeah.
And I think that culture prevailed to a great extent nowadays because you can see in the competitive side of jiu-jitsu, the sport becomes more professional and obviously more commercial. You can see that there are some incredible athletes that do it more for themselves, but you also have some incredible athletes that you feel like they're fighting for something bigger. And even like in this new generation, I'm not big on the names because I don't follow the competitive side of jiu-jitsu as closely, but I could see that there's some of the new generation that comes with that samurai service mentality. They understand that winning is nice and such, but you can see that they're trying to use the credibility, the spotlights that winning brings to them for something bigger.
Yes.
Whereas there's some others that are really just doing it for their own gain, fame, money, whatever that is. And I don't necessarily judge, but I do think that there is a perception in the jiu-jitsu community in general to value more the person that serves something greater, right? They're doing it for something bigger than themselves. But ultimately, I feel like those are the guys that are going to leave a greater legacy, right? So,
yeah. Thank you, man. Thank you, God.
Excelente resenha, irmão.
Muito obrigado, irmão.
Great resenha with this guy. Always learn from him, from the day one.
Muito obrigado.